Pokemon games have a long history of having new generations updated with additional content. Ever since the first generation, there have been multiple sister games or third version type of games that act as the definitive experience of a new generation. These games would be sold separately at the full price of an additional game. With Pokemon moving to the Nintendo Switch, a system capable of delivering digital content and updates much easier than previous Nintendo hardware, Pokemon finally has the opportunity to update their games with paid downloadable content for the first time. And with that, we have the Isle of Armor, the first mainline Pokemon DLC expansion for the newest generation Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. So, is it worth it? Should you buy it? And who is it for? One of the most important things with any expansion pass or DLC is the amount of content. Pokemon Sword and Shield's expansion pass is divided up into two separate releases for one price of $30. The Isle of Armor is only one of these releases and thus half the content of the entire DLC. Even alone, the Isle of Armor offers a good amount of total content. A new map location is accessible upon downloading the DLC. The Isle of Armor, while not as big as the wild area, is still a fairly large environment to explore. Lots of items are hidden all over, and there are around 100 new returning Pokemon that didn't already appear in Sword and Shield available to capture for your team. The main story content within the Isle of Armor can be completed in around 3 or so hours if you decide to charge through only that, but in addition to the other content offered on the Isle of Armor, there can be around 8 to 10 hours of things to do. The gameplay of Isle of Armor is the same traditional Pokemon gameplay that Pokemon fans are used to. Upon arriving to this new area, you meet your new DLC rival who is different depending on your version of the game, with Clara in Pokemon Sword and Avery in Pokemon Shield. While some initial impressions did mention the Isle of Armor receiving level scaling, it seems that unfortunately was not fully the case. There is level scaling, but only for those who have not yet beaten the main game, in which the level scaling is determined by the number of badges that you have. If you have already beaten the base game, all levels will be around 60 regardless, even if you bring level 100 Pokemon. I do wish that the DLC could have been improved to match the level with the party that you have, but it is what it is. Similarly, it is cool how you can dive into the new content with the DLC right away regardless of where you are in the main game, instead of having to play up to a certain point to see the new stuff. The main part of the Isle of Armor revolves around your character becoming a new student at the Battle Dojo run by Champion Leon's mentor, Mustard. Mustard entrusts you with a few trials on the Isle of Armor and eventually the new legendary Pokemon Kubfu. Kubfu is a shy Pokemon when you initially receive it, and it is your task to train it into becoming a confident, strong Pokemon. Training Kubfu will allow you to conquer one of the towers on the Isle of Armor, which will eventually let Kubfu evolve into the brand new Pokemon Urshifu. One of the best parts about the Isle of Armor gameplay is how you're free to do anything that you want at your own pace. While in the main game of Sword and Shield, if you arrived in a new town or city, you were forced to do the main story or what was required before doing the things that you wanted to do. Thankfully, that isn't the case with the Isle of Armor. Once you arrive, it is totally up to you. Want to explore every area and look for items? You can. Want to go around and just find as many new Pokemon as you're able to? Also possible. And if you want to progress the main story content, you have that choice as well. The freedom to finally play the adventure your own way is a great step up that was clearly missing from the initial base game. The graphics of Pokemon Sword and Shield were easily one of the most underwhelming parts of the game. For a huge AAA release as the first mainline Pokemon game on a home console, Pokemon Sword and Shield are not as graphically appealing as many other games running on the same system, such as Super Mario Odyssey, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. As the DLC is still using the same engine as the base game of Pokemon Sword and Shield, there really isn't much improvement to the graphics as one can expect. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any improvement at all. While not big, there are some small changes that have been done. The infamous trees from the wild area in the base game have actually been fixed with better textures that actually fit Pokemon Sword and Shield. The ground also has some small bushes, flower textures, and even logs and stones that appear now instead of just a low resolution flat texture that you find in the wild area. While these are not game-changing updates by any means, it is nice to see that Game Freak does seem to be getting better at making Pokemon games look good on a home console and actually having a more immersive world. There are some new music tracks added into the DLC as well. Pokemon games never really had an issue with music, and the music in Isle of Armor is no different. The battle themes are nice, and there are even different ones for each rival character, with a separate theme for Clara in Pokemon Sword and a separate theme for Avery in Pokemon Shield. While I didn't particularly love the new music added within the Isle of Armor, I did still think that it was decent. Of course, this is all subjective though. Maybe to you this was the best Pokemon music they've ever composed, but I personally didn't find any of the new tracks all that amazing, but they are still decent nonetheless. Of course, with Pokemon games, controls are never an issue. The controls in the Isle of Armor are still the same as all traditional Pokemon games, with moving around with the joystick and pressing buttons to select things, go back, and open up menus. There is a small issue within the Isle of Armor, but I didn't know which category to discuss this in, so I decided to add it here. One of the cool features that you unlock later is the ability to have the first Pokemon in your party follow you around like in previous Pokemon games. For some reason, this feature in Sword and Shield is much buggier than previous Pokemon games. Even with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee on the Switch, following Pokemon were not as big of a problem. Here in Pokemon Sword and Shield's DLC, the Pokemon move pretty slowly trying to catch up to the trainer, and you can easily push them around by running into them. It's not a game-breaking issue, but it's still something that should have been done a bit better. All in all, Isle of Armor is a pretty good DLC for the Pokemon Company and Game Freak's first attempt on traditional mainline downloadable content. And as mentioned before, this is only part 1 of the expansion pass that includes both parts for one price. Whether or not deciding to get the Isle of Armor really depends on the type of Pokemon player that you are. If you play Pokemon games for the story and adventure, it is pretty easy to say that the Isle of Armor probably is not the best choice for you. Going through just the main content, you'll finish in about 3 or so hours, and there really isn't anything that is a must-play type of experience. However, if you're the type of Pokemon player that will be catching all the new Pokemon that you can, exploring all for the hidden items, shiny hunting, and more things like that, then this is definitely worth it. There's tons of hours of gameplay here if that's the Pokemon type of player that you are. In conclusion, the Isle of Armor was a pretty good time for me, and I did have fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Game Freak and the Pokemon Company will deliver with part 2 of the Sword and Shield expansion pass, the Crown Tundra, later this year. And so there you go guys, that is my review of Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield's first mainline DLC, the Isle of Armor part 1 of the expansion pass. This was kind of a hard review to do because it is a DLC, so you can't really treat this as like an entire game review, but at the same time I still wanted to use like the same traditional rating system that I use in terms of games, and it's also a little bit harder because this is only part 1 of the DLC. We know that part 2 is going to be coming out later in the year with the Crown Tundra. That's going to be coming out around the fall or the winter, so it's kind of hard to do this whole entire review because there is going to be multiple parts to this DLC, so I can't just review the Isle of Armor because we still have half the other DLC left. And so once the Crown Tundra comes out, I'll probably do another review style type of video just like this one, and at the end of that video, because that'll be the last part of this expansion pass, that's when I'll be able to give you guys like a full rundown of if I think the DLC overall as a whole was worth it, including both of them for Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. But yeah, I still had a pretty good time playing through the Isle of Armor. I wouldn't say that it's like a must-play experience that you have to have on your Switch, but at the end of the day, if you're a Pokemon fan and you like catching Pokemon and shiny hunting and looking for items and just finding Pokemon and trying to complete your Pokedex, if you're that type of Pokemon fan, there really isn't any reason that I can see that you wouldn't enjoy playing through the Isle of Armor. And like I said, there's also a part 2 that's going to be coming out later this year with the Crown Tundra, and that definitely looks like it's going to be the more exciting one because there is like an additional story content with the new Pony character, and there's going to be much more exploring. You've got all the legendaries returning in max raid battles as well, so I definitely do think that one is going to be much more exciting. And so yeah, that is my review on the Pokemon Isle of Armor DLC, the first pack for the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion pass. Like I mentioned, it is kind of hard to do it because we still have the other half of the DLC coming out, but once that comes out, you can bet that there's definitely going to be a review video on that, and I'll go into detail and let you guys know if all the DLC is worth it. But that's going to do it for everything with the Isle of Armor. If you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to click that like button and also comment down below and let me know what you guys think of all this. What did you guys think of the Isle of Armor? Did you guys end up getting it? Did you play through all of it? Did you guys like it? Did you have a good time? Were there some parts that you guys didn't enjoy that much? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. If you're new to this channel, then please be sure to subscribe. I'm definitely going to have some more Pokemon content in the future, so definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Click on that bell to become a part of the notification squad. Go follow me on Twitter at Aero so you can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros and Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.